So, there are 4 areas I want to touch on in the next 15 to 20 minutes about how we are doing. The board asked us to develop metrics or ways of proving or showing to the public how we're doing. So the 4 areas are academic success, which is everything from our testing and our scoring and results that you see in the paper all the time. Also our graduation rate, how are we doing at getting kids to actually get that high school diploma? How are we doing at getting kids ready for that next step in their life, whatever that might be, college, career, or both? And responsible citizenship, how do we prepare kids to work in a community? Before we do that, I want to touch on something that's really important in this district. Your board's mission and vision has in it 2 words called the human connection. And it's very important in Laramie 1 because it's trying to show that the connection to people is what education is all about. And what I'm getting ready to show to you are charts and graphs. But I want to remind you that there's children behind these numbers. This is not data. These are kids. They have hopes and fears and dreams. They come to school happy and sad and scared, and they're real kids. And what we're going to show you are the snapshots of what those real children bring to us on certain days. And we have to remember that testing are these little narrow windows of time when we take a snapshot of what the kids choose to show us on that given day in their life. And they bring with them lots of things. So let's not forget ever the human face behind the data, because these are not charts and graphs, they're children. I want to start with a quick story because I always have to tell at least a cute or funny story about kids because that's why we're here. First day of school, you'll see a picture here. That's me in the yellow jacket there. This was the first day of school, and we were trying to get the word out to families and parents to drive carefully around schools. Those of you that have driven in Cheyenne for any length of time know that we have these schools right on these busy urban streets, and kids are crossing, and it's dangerous. So we tried to put a public relations campaign. I went out and was working the crosswalk the first morning, trying to bring attention to it. And this little second grader comes flying up the street. He runs over to the button and he pushes the button on the pole there and to turn the sign to a different, and then he immediately starts running out in the street. And I'm screaming, stop, stop. You know, when you push the button, the cars don't stop. When you push the button, it just turns a light on. I said, these cars go screaming through here every day. He looks at me really strange and he says, I crossed here every day last year and I never screamed one time. Metaphors, kids, anyway. So there's something cute like this every single day in every classroom in our district. And I just wanted to point out that it's about the children. It's not about charts and graphs. But we're in an age now of accountability. That's the hottest word going in the Wyoming legislature. Hear it every single day. Accountability, accountability. So if we're going to be accountable, I know of no other way to do it other than to show you some numbers and charts and graphs and trends and progress, because there's children behind these that are getting better every year. So let's start with some elementary and junior high data real quickly. This graph shows our PAWS scores from the last several years. And I would like to point out that last year, that's this little bump right here, last year was our best year ever. 5 of our 7 grade levels posted the highest grade percentages of students who are proficient in reading than we've ever had. This year, you'll see that it dropped. And that is because the state changed the test questions and put in more difficult questions, and the test has changed. Now, for your staff members who teach in the schools, that's tough because it's a moving target. And it's going to change again next year. And they've already told us there will be a new PAWS test next year. And the year after that, there will be a whole new test that won't be PAWS. So for your educators in the room, it's a bit of a moving target. But we've been doing better until they changed the test questions. And the whole state had the same phenomenon. So when you see that drop, it just means that there were fewer or less kids proficient on the new test. And I would expect that that could happen again next year. This is math, same scenario. Last year we were a 5 of 7 grade levels was our best years ever. And then, of course, with the new test, we had the same drops that you'll see with PAWS. Now, this next slide, I'll take a little time to explain it. There's 2 words at the top. You'll see the word status and the word improvement. In our district, there are 3 terms we use to try to explain how we look at this. And I use the analogy, if you go to the eye doctor and he puts you in a chair and he puts these numbers on the back wall and he puts the little lenses up there and he says, how does that look? And then he clicks it and changes the lens and you look through a new lens. Same numbers, new lens. And it looks different. And then there's a third lens, and he keeps going till he finds clarity. Well, there's 3 lenses that we use to look at all these numbers. The first one is called status. And what we want to know is, as parents, you might want to know how your district compares to the rest of the schools, districts in Wyoming. And we also want to know how we compare to the rest of the states and the rest of the kids in the country. So status is a comparison. Are we above average, average, or below? Well, there's a little chart at the bottom. If you see a green cell, which there aren't any on this chart, green means that on the PAWS test for status, a green cell would mean that that grade level on that test was above the rest of the state of Wyoming. And if you see a yellow chart or a yellow box, it would mean that the students in that grade level were at or close to the average of the rest of the state. And if you see a red box, it means they were below where the rest of the state of Wyoming is. So on our status, when it compares us to the rest of Wyoming, you'll see that we are at or slightly below the other districts in Wyoming. And you'll see that it hasn't changed a lot from 2012 to 2013. Now, remember what I said about the first 4 or 5 largest districts having half the students in the state? Your 4 or 5 largest districts are always going to have trouble being above state averages. Why? They set average. We set average. Now, we also are going to have a hard time being well below state averages, because if we're lower than them, then we would be, the 5 largest would be pulling down state averages. So there's a little bit more to the numbers than just that. The yellow box is over here on improvement, so let's talk about the improvement lens. So status is one lens. How do we compare? And by the way, you're about to see that we compare very differently to the rest of the country on other things, on MAP. But on PAWS, you'll see that we're not exceeding the state really in any area, but we're average in most of them. In math, you'll see a few more red boxes, meaning we have some grade levels where our math scores are below the state on the PAWS test. The box that says improvement. Improvement means comparing last year's third graders to the next group of third graders the next year. So these are different children, but they're all ours. They're all Laramie 1 kids. This is not a comparison to the rest of the state or the nation. And you'll see that our children on the new PAWS test performed pretty much like they did the year before on the other test. So there wasn't any improvement areas on the new difficult test that came up that stood out as being green. So let's talk a little bit about elementary and junior high MAP data. This chart here is very telling, and you don't need to worry about all the numbers, but if you just look at the color patterns. When Dr. Moore and I worked up this method of using color coding, the idea was to be able to give lay people a quick, easy way to look at it and get a feeling for what you're seeing. So I'll go through now and try to do a quick explanation of this. On the left side here, you will see something that says Q1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are called quintiles. What we've done there is we've taken that grade level and divided them up. So the top quintile, quintile 5, would be the top 20% of our students who are in the national, who are in the top 20% of the nation on their test. So when they took that MAP test, just like all the other kids in all the other 50 states, they were in the top 20% of our nation. The next would be the next 20%. And of course, Q1 would be the lowest 20%. So the students in our district who would be in the lowest 20% of the country on that test. Now, what you're going to see, if the box is green, it means that between fall, when the first test was given, and spring, when the last test was given, the growth of those students far exceeded national norms. So a green box means we grew kids during that 9 months faster than the rest of the nation for kids who had the same score on the test. So it's comparing apples to apples. A kid with a 200 score, we only go look at all the other 200s around the country and see how did they compare. And if you see a lot of green, you're seeing places where we exceed national norms. If you see yellow, it means we're right about where the national norms are. If you see red, it means we are below. Now, I think it wouldn't take too long for you to see a pattern. You'll notice in the elementaries, almost exclusively green. You'll see in the junior highs, lots of red. You'll see at the high school, it starts to be a mixed bag. You'll also see one other group, and that is the top quintile students. You'll see those that are in quintile 5 are 81 to 99th percentile students on the MAP test, you will see that except for elementary reading, where there are no red, you'll see that the top quintile students are not growing as fast. So this is one of your district's initiatives. And it's actually, this chart is actually better than last year's chart in terms of the junior high, there's less red, and the numbers that are in the boxes for the negative effect sizes are smaller than they were last year. So there's tremendous growth going on in some places. And at the elementary level, you can see there isn't a grade or a quintile where we are below. And there's one quintile where there isn't one place where we don't exceed the national norms. And that's our lowest students. Why? Wyoming has resources, and we use them. There are remediation activities going on in every school. We spend millions of dollars pulling kids, tutoring kids, extended day, summer programs, pull-out programs. And we are really taking that bottom group, and we're growing them faster than the rest of the country is able to do it. As you can see now, we've got to work with all kids now. This is not about only those who are not proficient. One negative side effect, if there is, to No Child Left Behind, is it made schools focus on the kids who are not proficient. And so kids that are already proficient are still scoring above the pause cut scores, and they look good on paper. But perhaps they don't grow as fast as other kids with that ability level. So that's our challenge. And so that's as frank as I can be about it. Those are the things that we have to deal with. This is a stacked bar chart, and I just bring it on because it's a real simple way of looking at the last chart you saw. And all I wanted to point out is if you look at reading from 2011-12 to 2012-13, you'll see more green. You'll see in language, more green. You'll see in math, a lot more green. You'll see in the totals, more green. So basically what we're saying when it comes to the MAP testing, which is our only stable assessment we've been able to keep without it changing a lot, with that assessment we have a pretty good track record. We've gone from having only 4 or 5 schools that were above national norms to only 4 or 5 that are below in our district, all in the last 3.5 years. So there is progress. It doesn't show up on pause like it does on MAP, but we're still proud of it. And this particular one, we're moving into high school in the home stretch here. I wanted to point out a couple things for our high school data. This chart is being used because it's an interesting conversation going on in the legislature. As you know, they dropped the 11th grade pause and they replaced it with the ACT test. And so all our students in Wyoming, by statute now, are being asked to try to take the ACT. What you're going to see is the blue dots represent all the states in the nation. This one we've picked out as Massachusetts up here because everyone always is holding up Massachusetts as one of the stellar states and examples of great ACT scores. And so you'll see here that the more students participate, and that's the numbers you see along the bottom here, the more students take the test, the lower the ACT composite is. That probably shouldn't surprise any of the educators in the room. If you have students who never used to take the test because they weren't going to college and now they're asked to take the test, there's going to be students who don't score as well, who weren't planning that life for themselves, and now they got to take the college prep test. So what you'll see is across the country, the more students take it, the lower their composite scores are. There are 8 states where everyone takes it, and Wyoming is one of them, and we're right there at number 4. So out of the 8 states where everyone takes the ACT, we're 4th in the 8. So to put that in perspective, let's look at another test real quick. Let's take a look at the SAT. SAT is a test that's not used that much in the West. It's used a lot by the East Coast and Midwest universities. And so on SAT, you'll notice that in Wyoming, wow, we look pretty good. That's because only 5% of our students take it. Who are they? The 5% of the elite students probably going to an East Coast university. And so they're taking the test and scoring well. And you can see in Massachusetts, where 88% of the kids take the SAT, suddenly they don't look quite as stellar because most of the kids are taking the test in Massachusetts. So the point of these slides is to show you when you see these stats in the papers about where Wyoming ranks, please remember it's not always apples to apples. Participation rate does affect how these states score on these tests.